Teacup, Tempest by Wigworm. Oh my gods! Tatsumaki slumped against Kakashi's side. You wouldn't believe how freaking immature they are! She whined. I mean, I know kids that age are supposed to be immature, but really? She rolled her eyes and gestured with a free hand, the other holding the ice cream cone Kakashi had bought for her. Sometimes it makes me want to bash my head in. She chuckled and brought the ice cream up to look at it. Kakashi couldn't help the small smile that was turning his lips up. You've been dealing with young children? Tatsumaki glanced up at him, pausing mid-lick, her tongue stuck out of her mouth and covered with white frozen ice cream. Kakashi tried very hard not to let that affect him. She huffed and pulled the cone away, closing her mouth and swallowing the ice cream. I can't confirm that. She straightened from her slouch against him and rubbed the back of her head with a bit of a blush covering her tan cheeks. But if I am, they aren't my children, and they aren't as young as Ito-chan. Kakashi responded to her smirk with a barking laugh, amused by this amazing woman. Here she was on a long-term mission, fearing for her personal safety and raising a child conceived of rape, and yet she was so energetic and happy and open. He had invited her out to have some time for a break because she was only about 16 years old and had been working so hard, and he knew that even at 24, he still liked ice cream. So that was what he'd ended up suggesting. So they both hugged and kissed Hirohito, mentioned to Mito that they'd return in a bit, and went out for said ice cream. Kakashi was relatively sure that he was going to be questioned about his date with the ever-elusive Yamamoto-san when he returned to the daycare, but he didn't really consider this a date. This was a more of a getting-to-know-you-better moment. Shinobi didn't usually have time to go out in groups of friends and then pair off with the most compatible mate they found, so they'd outlined a few pre-dating activities so that both parties knew that they were actually being vetted for dating. Ice cream wasn't on the list, but coffee was. Kakashi had asked Tatsumaki if she wanted to get coffee, but had been told that the young woman didn't drink coffee. Tatsumaki had been the one to suggest tango, but Kakashi felt that hit on date too much, so they'd compromised on a nice walk in one of the parks and a cone of ice cream. So, do you have any other children, Tatsumaki-san, or just Hito-chan? Kakashi asked when they'd both been silent for a short while, wanting to know more about the young woman he was starting to really like. Oh, please. Tatsumaki waved a hand in the air. You can call me Maki, and no, I only have Hito-chan. Kakashi felt his heart flutter in his chest when he was told he was allowed to call her by a familiar nickname. He hadn't thought that she liked him that much. Only Hito-chan, he repeated. Do you have plans for more children in the future? Maki rolled her eyes. Yeah, no. I'm far too young to be thinking about having more children right now. Maybe in 8 to 10 years I'll have another child, but Hito is more than enough at my age. She sighed then. I always imagined a big family when I was younger, though, so I'll most likely want more than 2 altogether. Not really surprised. Kakashi nodded along with her. She'd been raped and impregnated so young that he could understand that she'd want to wait until she was 25 to have more children. That she wanted at least 2 more children was a good sign for him, as he himself had plans for 2 to 3 children. 2 of his own and Hito? He mused silently to himself. What do you like to do in your off time, Maki-san? Kakashi asked, curious. She had to have personal pursuits as well as her job and child. Biting her lips, Maki hummed under her breath. I don't know. I like to train. I used to pull pranks all the time, but I've sort of switched those over to shogi and go for the planning and execution of strategy and tactics since Hito-chan. She mused some more, then smiled up at him. I like to read adventure books. I don't like textbooks, and I don't have an opinion of history books, though I like to learn about shinobi history. I've been told that I'm an auditory and kinesthetic learner, not a visual person. I don't do lectures either, but if you tell me something interesting, I'll remember it. Considering that information, Kakashi offered up some information on himself. I like to train as well. I enjoy reading various materials, including textbooks. He gave Maki a sly grin, and she chuckled at their differences rather than scoffing. I like to learn every which way possible, but then I'm a bit smarter than the average person. Really? Maki wasn't questioning his claim. She was trying to quantify it. How much smarter? I became Chunin when I was 6, Kakashi remarked offhandedly. He wasn't bragging, and he knew that she understood that. I made Jonin when I was 14, and created my first original jutsu then. I could read by the time I was 13 months old, and spoke my first word at the age of 7 months. Maki stared at him with wide eyes. Wow, that is totally amazing! You're like a genius! Kakashi was about to respond when Maki continued, not giving him space to talk. I bet you know the most awesome jutsu if you've been Jonin for so long. Could you teach me some? I mean, I've been training with Guy on my taijutsu, and I probably don't know half of what I should know to be a battle shinobi. But I wasn't exactly trained that way in the first place. I love sparring! If I could, I would totally be on a frontline team. I have chakra reserves up to my eyeballs, but apparently I have other talents. Maki trailed off, and Kakashi had to fight from reassuring her that he didn't just like the way she looked. He had figured out quickly that she'd been trained primarily in infiltration and seduction, straight out of the academy, so obviously she wouldn't know the battle skills that most Junin had. It almost made him sick to his stomach that Maki had been chosen to learn the seduction arts over her own wishes to be a battle shinobi, simply because she was beautiful. And it wasn't a surprise that she'd not used the skills she did know outside of her missions if she hadn't have wanted them in the first place. I'd be more than happy to show you a few jutsu, Maki-san. Kakashi slowly, cautiously extending his arm, and Maki didn't flinch away from him, but wound her own arm around his, locking their elbows together. Do you have any chakra control exercises? If you wanted to move from the seduction division in Anbu to be a battle shinobi, she'd need to cover pretty much everything from Genin training up. Though now it made a lot more sense about her taijutsu. A seductress wouldn't need taijutsu, so all that she would have learned would have been the basic academy taijutsu, being too busy learning a horizontal taijutsu, and the academy had been years ago for Maki. Her quick study could easily be attributed to her dedication and kinesthetic learning ability in his mind. No. Maki winced and bit her lip. I can't make clones, but I can do body switches, transformations, rope escapes, and the cloaked invisibility. I know most E-rank jutsu and a few Ds. She sounded embarrassed, and Kakashi was sure it was because the ones that she had explicitly stated she knew were used mostly by the Anbu seduction division after a shinobi had made chunin. Very few battle chunin would use simplistic forms of jutsu. Battle shinobi needed more powerful jutsu to counteract an enemy's powerful jutsu. Seduction shinobi rarely were sent on a mission they couldn't get through using just E-rank jutsu, as they mostly dealt with softer civilian targets. And anything more powerful that Maki knew, she wouldn't be telling him, because the Anbu seduction division were very secretive about their jutsu. Besides, Kakashi was sure that the more powerful jutsu that she knew would involve a lot less clothing and morals. There was one thing that bothered Kakashi, though. You can't make a clone? Yeah! I don't know what's wrong with the stupid things, but they come out looking like they're high on something, and then they just explode! Maki shook her head. It's very annoying! Have you tried to make water clones? Or even shadow clones? Maki stopped walking, pulling Kakashi to a halt by their still connected arms. Excuse me? Listen, oh great one, I can't make regular clones. What makes you think I'll be able to make elemental clones? She frowned. And what is a shadow clone? A smile played on Kakashi's lips. Well, you did mention that you have a lot of chakra. It's possible that you're overloading your clone, causing them to look weird and then explode. Shadow clones have so much chakra in them that they're solid clones that can take a pretty serious hit before dispersing. It took a moment, but then Maki snorted. You suck. Totally. Kakashi cocked his head in silent question, and Maki explained herself. I spent years in the academy not being able to do a clone, and here you are. You listen to my explanation of what happens, and poof! You have an answer. If only you'd hung out around the school. Ah, Kakashi mocked her lightly. But then I could have been mistaken for a stalker. I mean, I'm 10 years older than you. Do you really think you wanted an 18 to 20-year-old stalking you when you were in the academy? That surely would have affected your ability to concentrate. Maki laughed at him, sing-songingly mocking as well. But I would have been able to do the clone! They continued laughing together for a bit as they finished their gowns. A sudden thought occurred to Kakashi, and he looked down to the woman who was contentedly hanging onto his arm, looking around the park with interest. So, you haven't asked to see my face, he commented lightly. He'd never before met someone who hadn't asked within the first 2 days of knowing him. Maki had known him as one of her child's guardians for almost 5 weeks, and now they just spent about an hour together, and she still hadn't asked, or even looked closely at his face. Maki didn't even look away from where she was watching some of the upcoming graduating class of the academy play/train, racing through the trees, a game of capture the flag at its finest. Don't really care what you look like, she muttered, her emotions dipping for some reason. At least you like me and invite me out to do stuff. Warmth filled Kakashi, and he stared at Maki with wonder. She liked him. She didn't care if he was handsome or cute or scarred or that he looked like his father. She just liked him. For him. It was a novel experience for Kakashi. All the enemies Kakashi had, he had because of his reputation. Everyone he considered a friend, even Guy, had wanted to know him in the beginning because of what he was, instead of who he was. Maki liked him for who he was. As they made their way back to the daycare, Kakashi could feel his heart beating heavily with something. Maki liked him. They were met by Hito clinging to the gates of the daycare fence. When the toddler spotted his mother, he yelled and clapped with excitement. Kakashi realized that Hito was used to getting picked up generally around 5, and that by asking Maki to spend time with him instead of her son, he was asking her to choose between him and her son. He wouldn't do that again. Next time, it would be planned. Next time, Hito could come as well. He didn't want to separate Maki from Hito. Hello, darling. Maki cuddled Hito to herself, petting his hair and kissing his cheeks and nose. Hito kissed her back enthusiastically, his tiny hands cupping her ears. Both of them giggled, and Kakashi couldn't help but smile at the sight of them. Hito was practically a male clone of Maki, and seeing them together was adorable. Kashi-chan! Hito turned from his mother to Kakashi and reached out with both hands towards the Jonin, leaning away from Maki and making her support his body so that he didn't fall. Maki laughed at Hito's antics and nodded for Kakashi to take the boy. Why, hello there, Hito-chan. Kakashi buzzed Hito's forehead, and the toddler, to Kakashi's surprise, reached for his own neck and fumbled for a moment before lifting his orange shirt up and pulling it over his nose before pressing his covered mouth to Kakashi's chin and making kissing noises. Aww! Maki cooed at them, her hands pressed up against her chin. You guys are so adorable! A blush made its way over Kakashi's cheeks, thankfully hidden by his mask, and he cuddled Hito to his chest. What a strange feeling he had in his chest. He wasn't sure what it was, but he'd figure it out. All he knew right now was that he didn't want to give Hito back to Maki so that they could go home. Maki laughed again, this time at his embarrassed silence, and she stepped into his personal space to collect Hito from him. She had to pry the child off of him, but Kakashi wasn't really against the hold Hito had on his vest. Okay, Hito-chan, you have to let Kakashi go now so you can go home. Kakashi told Hito gently as he helped Maki disengage her son from him, and they chuckled at his grasping hands, Hito not wanting to let go of Kakashi at all. Once Hito was safely in Maki's arms, Kakashi paused for a moment, then leaned down and kissed the top of Hito's head and Maki's before backing away. Have a safe trip home, he said quietly. Maki smiled at him softly and nodded. You too, Kakashi. And then she turned and left with Hito hanging himself over her shoulder, waving goodbye frantically to the Jonin. Someone poked his side, and Kakashi was surprised to realize that someone had snuck up on him. So you're dating Yamamoto-san? Akimichi Mito-kun. She's been alone for so long. I think you'll do each other well. Kakashi lifted a hand, backing away. Not dating, Mito-san. We just went for a walk. Mito eyeballed him. You had ice cream. She said it like it was hard evidence or something. And Hito-chan likes you too. Mito-san, Kakashi said, only to be interrupted. Of course, Ito-chan likes everyone, but he never emulates anyone but his mother. That means he wants to be like you. Mito told him sternly. And that means you had better step up and be a man. Of course, Mito-san. Kakashi bowed his head to her and flickered away, hoping to get away without her following him. He couldn't help but think about what she had told him, though. It wasn't exactly ego-boosting to have a child emulate him, but there was something that made him feel giddy to know that Maki's son liked him enough to treat him like family. He wondered what Maki thought of her son copying him. He hoped she was okay with it.